Hublot has its own category, right? We'll put that in the Hublot category. Because there is indeed something worse than a trash can.
The 21st of September 2020 was truly a rough day for Hublot, because it's the day on which Nico Leonard, one of the biggest watch YouTubers, uploaded his video in which he ranked luxury watches from great to terrible. And in this, Hublot even got its very own category. Not because it was so great, but because Nico wanted a category called trash below the worst, so he could include Hublot. And by then, at least, so the 21st of September in 2020, it became a running gag, but not only within the watch community, but even apart from that, since Nico is so popular outside of the watch world too. The running gag that Hublot is by far the shittest watch brand there ever was. But even before that, Hublot wasn't necessarily popular within the watch community. It seems like there has always been this group of people within the watch community who considered Hublot to be overpriced trash. It's also something that pops up when I'm doing my Q&As, for example, you know, just in DMs and in comments, people asking why exactly others hate Hublot that much, and more importantly, is the hate justified? Is Hublot really the worst brand, or is the shitstorm unjustified, basically? And this is exactly what I will be looking at in this video today. I will start out with the 5 main reasons as to why Hublot received so much shit from the luxury watch community, and then I will hit you with why or why not the bad rep that Hublot gets is justified, and if they actually might be pretty great after all. So, you know what comes now? Say it with me. Let's get started. Reason number 1 as to why Hublot has such a bad reputation is that many accuse them of shamelessly copying their design from others, you know, the AP Royal Oak or the Patek Philippe Nautilus. And at first glance, you really could be like, oh yeah, I totally see the similarities. But to understand where these accusations are coming from, we have to take a quick trip back down a memory lane, because in the 1970s, the entire mechanical watch industry was down on its knees, on the brink of a complete wipeout. This time is also called the quartz crisis. Japanese engineers created a new type of watch that crafted electrical circuits with the help of quartz crystals. And those quartz crystal powered watches were not only so much more precise, I mean, we're talking about 5 seconds of a deviation per month instead of the 5 seconds deviation per day on average that you get with mechanical watches. But what's even worse is that they were so much more affordable too. I mean, right now you can go on Amazon and find quartz watches like starting from $5, whereas the cheapest mechanical watch might set you back at around like $50 to $100 even. And so back then, all of a sudden, almost no one had a need for mechanical watches anymore. And these old established brands like AP, Rolex or Patek were practically out of business within months. So how did they manage to survive all this? Well, that was a very smart move. Instead of marketing their watches as tools, they started to market their watches as luxurious status symbols. I mean, the AP Royal Oak is considered to be one of the very first sports steel luxury watches. So their most important feature was no longer just telling the time, but their ability to represent the owner's wealth and status. The designer of the Royal Oak, Gerald Genta, designed the Patek Philippe Nautilus very shortly after his first hit, so the Royal Oak, and helped the watch industry to avoid an almost certain downfall. I mean, really think about it. Without AP or Patek, we probably wouldn't have this huge variety in mechanical watches at all, if we even had any. Just like we no longer really have fax machines, you know? So when the crisis was averted and mechanical watches became a status symbol, Hublot was born about 10 years later in the 1980s, at that time known as a label from the brand MDM Genève, and they came out with this as their first watch. And at first we can totally see the many similarities between this one and the iconic Royal Oak or the Patek. All 3 of them are inspired by portholes, and then on top you've got this rubber strap. So many people accuse Hublot here of directly profiting off of the initial hype of these radically new types of luxury watches without having to actually fight the fight, like a hanger-on that hopped on at just the right time, which also leads us to the second reason as to why Hublot seems to be so unpopular. Oh, and before we continue, I want to say that should you actually want to go for a Hublot, I recommend checking out the offers currently available on CHRONEXT, which is the sponsor of this video today. On CHRONEXT, you will find watches from brands like Hublot and many others offering pickup locations all over the world and the crucial feeling of safety when buying watches online. I bought my Yacht Master 37 from them and I'm very happy with it. So if you want to save some money on your next CHRONEXT purchase, make sure to use my code Jenni to get the best price for your next watch. So that is code Jenni on chronext.com. Reason number 2 as to why so many do not see Hublot as a luxury watch brand is the lack of perceived authentic tradition, or I guess the better word would be heritage. If you have paid attention to what I just said before, you know that Hublot was founded in the 1980s. So very conveniently after the quartz crisis has been overcome by others. In contrast, AP has been founded in 1875 and Patek is even older, being established in 1839. So that makes it a solid century older than Hublot. And adding to that is what those brands had to endure and really overcome. They contributed to the establishment of the wristwatch itself, providing tools to tell the time and being one of the pillars that hold up the foundation of industrialization, really. Or, in short, heritage. And well, that's what Hublot doesn't really have. There is no big heritage, no history of ups and downs that they can look back on. And I mean, you could exaggerate and say that there weren't really any highs, but only lows so far. After all, it seems that a lot of people dislike Hublot as a brand, but of course, it's not that simple, but we will get to that at the end of this video. We can agree that for lots of people, heritage is an important part of luxury. We can definitely agree on that for lots of people, heritage is an important part of a luxury watch brand. And some even say that there can't be no luxury watch brand without it. I mean, Rolex or Panerai have provided soldiers with their watches during the Second World War, and Patek and AP produced some incredible innovations when it comes to mechanical watches. Breitling, for example, can look back on a long history in aviation, and Hublot, well, Hublot got on board in the 80s, I guess. So now let's talk about our next point, because our next point is the target audience of Hublot. Actually, Hublot did experience a hype, and though I wasn't aware of them at the time, Kai, my husband, has told me that there was a time where he was super on board with Hublot watches. At around 2016, there seemed to be a lot of people who were really into Hublot. Those big chunky watches were definitely a statement piece and something striking enough to let everybody know that you have spent over $10,000 on this watch. And here's the issue that divides the watch community like no other. The thing with status symbols and the, entire flexing culture of it. A lot of the time I feel like there are only two camps here. The one, true watch lovers and enthusiasts, those who know every little detail about all kinds of watches in different price categories, who appreciate the $100 Seiko as much as the $2 million Patek, those who appreciate watches for the craftsmanship. And then there are the social media hype house, rich kids, though I should say that this is not only limited to young people or like young adults. Every age can be in that included, But yeah, those who buy watches for mainly one reason, to flex with it and show, I'm rich. Today, brands like Rolex, AP or Patek have similar issues. Lots of people accuse these brands of almost catering towards the hype and the flex. But in that regard, it was actually Hublot who set the trend. Because in a time before it seemed like luxury watches had infiltrated the mainstream, Hublot was on people's radars because of their chunky and flashy watches, and one of the first brands to, flex with. I know it's a weird word, I can't think of anything better. And that's where the accusation is coming from so many watch enthusiasts that they have against Hublot. Since Hublot doesn't have any perceived authentic heritage, it has been created as a shallow status symbol for the show-offs of the world from the very start. It was never about the, honest wish to create a mechanical watch for the sake of it, but to create a soulless symbol of status, showing others you're better than them. And the next point makes it even worse. So this is a Switzer Magnus, a mechanical wristwatch you can get on Amazon for about $250. Built into this watch is a movement from ETA. Those movements are especially popular with more affordable mechanical watches, They are reasonably accurate, run reliable for quite some time, and are easy to service by most watchmakers. You can go out and buy one of these movements yourself for about $100 if you want to build your own watch from scratch, and I mean, how cool is that? And this here is the Hublot Big Bang. It is the Hublot, as it is one of the most well-known watches from that brand, and it is also a chronograph, so it has a stopwatch function, basically. This watch here costs about $13,000, a price that could still be considered rather tame. Hear me out. If we factor in all the other luxury watch brand prices, I mean, a Rolex Daytona, also a chronograph, goes for around the same at retail, and a Patek Philippe chrono will set you back at about $70,000 or more. But here's the problem. Built into this Hublot Big Bang is a movement with the name HUB 4100. So far, so good. And you might now ask yourself what the problem here is. Well, this movement is based on an ETA movement. What? Well, yeah, you heard that right. Hublot has bought ETA movements to use as a basis for their movements. I mean, they obviously finished it nicely and put work into it, but yeah. What remains is a price tag of about $13,000. And that is something a lot of people really criticize Hublot for. It also seems to strengthen the thing I mentioned before, so the no heritage situation. The target audience of people not really caring for the watch itself, but only what the watch can do for their status, and the fact that they don't even care that this is only a $100 movement inside. But people at this point may still be asking, like, where exactly is the problem with that? Adrian from Bark and Jack did a similar video about this topic, and he totally nailed it when he said that you do not build a Ford motor into a Bentley, Not to say that a Ford motor is unreliable or a bad thing, but it is just not something you would put into a Bentley. And this is what leads us to the last reason as to why Hublot seems to be so unpopular. This is a Hublot Classic Fusion Ultra Thin. It is made from titanium and has a classic 3-hand layout. So you got an hour, minute, and seconds hand, and goes for about $13,000 at retail. And okay, I know you've heard it all, but wait, this watch right here has an in-house movement. So a movement entirely developed by Hublot. So they did not buy an affordable ETA movement, modified and built it, no. But Hublot really created this movement from start to finish, and it looks great too. But we find the problem again with the price. This watch has only 3 hands, so very basic, and costs about $13,000. I mean, yeah, it is made from titanium, and titanium is expensive to work with. But like Adrian has mentioned, there is also the Pelagos from Tudor, for example, also made from titanium with an in-house movement by Tudor, and costs, well, about $5,000. So a little bit over the third of the Hublot. And I mean, hey, theoretically, you could also get a Rolex Oyster Perpetual at retail for a bit over $5,000 too, with an in-house movement, and on top it's a Rolex. So instead of a Classic Fusion Ultra Thin, you could get a Tudor, a Rolex, and perhaps even, an almost on top, and you would still have a bit of money left at the end. This pricing strategy, what many would call completely over the top, is what puts the final nail into Hublot's coffin. And at this point, people would say, well deserved, Hublot really seems to be doing a shit job. But again, it really isn't that simple. Is Hublot really that bad of a brand? Are all these loud voices on the internet right? Should you really stay far, far away from Hublot? The 5 reasons I just mentioned make it very easy to say, well, yes, of course, why would you even consider a watch from Hublot? But here's the problem. Reason number 2 was the topic of copying. Hublot gets hate for allegedly copying watches Genta has designed, more specifically the Royal Oak or the Nautilus. Oh, but wait, didn't Zenit release the Chronomaster Sport? Didn't Breitling release the Premier Datura chronograph recently? And what about Omega's new releases? Oh, and whoopsie, the Chronomaster Sport looks almost exactly like a Rolex Daytona. That Breitling looks scarily similar to a Patek Philippe 5270p, and almost every new Omega release looks like it was inspired by a previous Rolex watch. Do Zenit, Omega, or Breitling get the same hate? I mean, yeah, from a few people, I'm sure, but in general, people aren't as up in arms about it, and I would say the commotion was really kept within a limit, if there even was any. But let's continue with the heritage issue, or the lack thereof. Do you know Richard Mille? If not, it's a brand established in 1999, so 19 years after Hublot, And those watches are currently one of the most hyped watches. Even at retail, there's no Richard Mille even available below $250,000, but that's not even the tip of the iceberg. Most watches are sold way above retail, some even go for over $1 million. Do those people care that there's even less heritage and history attached than Hublot? Doesn't seem like it. Like I've mentioned previously, it has become quite the norm, not only since social media is around to brag around with status symbols. It's fine, we're all humans. It really seems like everyone with a bit of a followership on social media has at least a Rolex, if not a Patek or AP, and not necessarily a Hublot they're trying to force into every shot. And are people miffed about it? Well, sure, some people are, but that doesn't mean that the majority hates them for it. But now with the movements at the latest, there has to be a solid reason for why we have the current situation with Hublot and all the hate, right? Well, no, not really. A lot, and I really mean a lot, of nowadays luxury watch brands like Oris or Tag Heuer, for example, work with ETA or Sellita movements. It is a well-known fact within the industry and hobby and is widely accepted, except for Hublot. And that brings us to the last point. Of course, it is not accepted because Hublot is way too overpriced. But let's be real here. Isn't, by definition, every luxury or even a regular watch overpriced that is over $100? Because that's the price mechanical watches seem to start around, and those can do what every other watch like a Rolex can do, and that is telling the time. Okay, now it is time for a conclusion. Is Hublot trash, or are they actually good watches? For starters, let me be transparent here and tell you that I wouldn't buy a Hublot watch for myself. Their design just doesn't speak to me personally. But Kai filmed a Hublot for one of his reviews, and he wore it for a month, and I took a look at it too, and it was totally fine. Again, it wasn't my cup of tea, looks-wise, but it had some really cool features. Kai enjoyed it too, and yeah, really no big deal. When filming the watch, you could see that it was incredibly well finished, the movement looked great, and it showed a stunning level of detail. And yes, Hublot retail prices are high, no doubt about that, but you can also get a good deal on them on the secondary market, so that is that. And now that I have really, sat down and spent some time with the brand and its recent and not so recent history, there is one thing Hublot really is, and that is really unlucky. Somehow Hublot popped up when watches became this hypey show-off thing in recent time and has immediately been branded with that label ever since. And we all know that when the internet has decided on something, it can be really hard to come back from that. And then on top of that, one of the most well-known YouTube watch personalities makes it a running joke to joke about Hublot. And hey, I think at the end of the day, it is more about the joke and not the watch brand itself. And I truly think that Nico means no harm with this. But the combination of all of that has led to the brand perception Hublot has to deal with now. And still, I know enough people who own and collect Hublot watches, and they absolutely adore them. And isn't that the essence of collecting watches and being in this hobby? Everyone should go out and buy what they like for whatever reason and just enjoy it no matter what other people are saying or thinking. Hey, I made a video rather recently about just that, about how I do not think that anyone has the right to decide or make the rules on how to enjoy something authentically, because at the end of the day, we all have to face the hard truth that all our watches are hopelessly overpriced if they are more expensive than they need to be. So why does everyone hate Hublot? Truth be told, not everyone hates Hublot. And I hope with this video you now have a starting point to make up your own mind and see for yourself whether or not Hublot would be a great choice for you. Right, and now it's your turn. I would love for you to tell me what you think about all of this. Why do you think we ended up in this situation, or am I in my own Hublot bubble here? Let me know, as always, what you think in the comments down below, and that is all I have for you today. As always, if you have enjoyed this video, I would be so happy if you would give this a thumbs up, and if you want to see more videos like this one, I recommend subscribing to my channel, and then I will see you in my next video. Bye!